They called him a man of God, a shepherd to his flock, a voice of wisdom and faith. Every Sunday his words filled the walls of Greater Hope Baptist Church, washing over his congregation like divine truth. The people listened. They believed. They trusted. But trust can be dangerous. Trust can be blinding. And sometimes trust can be deadly. Behind the pulpit, behind the sermons, behind the carefully crafted image of righteousness, Malcolm Carter held a secret so dark, so vile, it could tear apart everything he built. But secrets don't stay buried forever. And when the truth threatened to rise to the surface, when his perfect world stood on the brink of collapse, one person stood in his way. 18-year-old Jasmine Carter had her whole life ahead of her, a daughter any father would be proud of, bright, kind-hearted, full of promise. She was weeks away from graduating high school, dreaming of college, of independence, of a future beyond the shadow of her father's reputation. But Jasmine knew something she wasn't supposed to know, and the moment she discovered the truth, she became a problem that needed to be erased. March 17, 2024, Atlanta, Georgia. Jasmine Carter was supposed to meet her best friend for coffee. A simple plan, a casual evening. She left home at 6:30 p.m. She never came back. Her phone last pinged near the old church parking lot. Calls went unanswered, messages left unread. By midnight, her family was worried. By morning, they were desperate. And by the third day, their worst fears came true. A jogger, a wooded trail, a body discarded like an afterthought. She was gone. The city mourned. The congregation wept. Her father stood before them, tears in his eyes, a broken man preaching about grief and loss. But the ones who listened closely, the ones who truly paid attention, saw something else. A crack, a hesitation, a weight pressing down on him, heavier than sorrow. Because Pastor Malcolm Carter knew something they didn't. He knew the truth. He knew exactly what happened to his daughter, and soon so would everyone else. This isn't just a murder. This isn't just a tragedy. This is a story of betrayal, deception, and the lengths a man will go to bury his sins. A father, a pastor, a killer. The question is, how far would you go to protect your secrets? Jasmine Carter, high school senior, honor roll student, choir member. A girl raised in the very teachings her father preaches. A girl who believes in faith, in family, in trust. But trust is a fragile thing. And that morning, as she listens to her father's sermon, something inside her has shifted. A seed of doubt, a whisper of something that doesn't sit right. Because Jasmine has seen something, heard something, and for the first time in her life, she is afraid. That evening, Jasmine is supposed to meet her best friend Erica Williams for coffee. A small cafe just a few blocks from home. They had plans, college applications, summer trips, the excitement of a future just beginning. She leaves home at 6:30 p.m., a casual goodbye, no signs of distress, no indication that she would never return. Erica waits. 10 minutes, 20. Texts go unanswered. Calls ring, then go to voicemail. Maybe she got caught up with family. Maybe she lost track of time. But an hour passes, then two. And that uneasy feeling that something isn't right begins to settle in. By 11 p.m., Jasmine's family starts calling. No response. Midnight comes. Her phone is off. Her mother, Sharon Carter, feels it in her bones. This isn't normal. Something is wrong. And by the time dawn breaks, panic has set in. A call is made. A missing persons report is filed. And within hours, Detective Andre Collins is assigned to the case. Collins has seen cases like this before. Runaways, arguments, teenagers leaving without notice, only to return the next day. But as he gathers the details, something about this one feels different. Jasmine wasn't troubled. She had no history of running away, no conflicts at home, no reason to disappear without a trace. And then, there's the strangest detail of all, her last known location. Her phone last pinged near the church, not the coffee shop, not her home, the place she should have left hours earlier, the place her father was preaching about morality, about sin, about consequences. The first 24 hours are critical, but as the hours slip into days, hope begins to dwindle. And then, on the third day, hope is shattered altogether. A jogger, a wooded trail off Cascade Road, a body hidden beneath the underbrush like something discarded, lifeless, unmoving. A girl who was supposed to be studying for finals, planning her graduation, but instead, she's here, alone, cold. The news spreads fast. The city mourns. The congregation gathers in prayer. And at the pulpit, Pastor Malcolm Carter delivers another sermon. This time it's about loss, about grief, about a father's pain. But there are those who listen closer, who watch his movements, his expressions, who hear not just the words but the spaces between them. Because something is off, something is wrong, and the ones who truly pay attention begin to realize Pastor Carter isn't just mourning, he's hiding. Jasmine Carter is dead, but the truth? The truth is just beginning to surface. The night swallows the city, streetlights flickering as the hours stretch on. The first signs of worry start as small ripples. A quick text from Erica, then another. No answer. A call, ringing into the void, eventually landing on voicemail. By 8 p.m. she's pacing, her fingers drumming anxiously against the cafe table. Jasmine was always on time, always dependable. This wasn't like her. By 9 p.m. the messages are more urgent. Erica dials again, her voice tight with unease. Still nothing. She tries Jasmine's mother, but Sharon Carter hasn't heard from her either. And now, something settles deep in her stomach, a sensation she can't quite name. But it feels wrong. The minutes stretch into an hour, then 2. It's 11 p.m. when Erica's worry turns to fear, and her fingers shake as she dials 911. The operator's voice is calm, procedural. When was the last time you saw her? What was she wearing? Could she have gone somewhere else? Erica doesn't have the answers. All she knows is that Jasmine was supposed to be here, and now she's not. Within the hour, the search begins. Jasmine's mother calls every friend, every relative, anyone who might have seen her. Her father, he's oddly quiet, distraught but not frantic, reserved but not panicked. He prays with the congregation, his voice trembling with grief. Yet there's something unsettling about the way he speaks. Too measured, too controlled, as if he already knows how this story ends. By morning, missing persons reports are filed. Flyers go up across the city. Jasmine's smile frozen in time, staring from lampposts, store windows, bulletin boards. A girl with her whole future ahead of her. Now just a face on a piece of paper, lost among the crowd. Police officers canvass the area, knocking on doors, asking the same questions over and over. Did you see her? Was she with anyone? Did anything seem off? But the answers are the same. No one saw anything. No one knows where she went. It's as if she vanished into thin air. Then a breakthrough, or something close to it. Detective Andre Collins sifts through cell tower data, tracking Jasmine's last known location. The coffee shop, number home, number the signal pings near a place that sends a shiver down his spine. An abandoned parking lot behind Greater Hope Baptist Church, not far from the woods, isolated, quiet. The kind of place where things happen unseen. Officers move quickly, flashing lights bouncing off the empty pavement as they comb through the area. A discarded purse, a phone case. No phone, no Jasmine. But there's something else. Security footage from a building across the street. A camera angled just right, capturing a single vehicle pulling into the lot that night. The grainy image shows a car, a dark sedan, one that looks eerily familiar. Collins leans in, studying the shape, the license plate barely visible in the poor lighting. He exhales, a slow, heavy breath as recognition sets in. He's seen this car before, parked outside a church, parked outside a home, parked in the driveway of a grieving father. Pastor Malcolm Carter's car. It's not enough, not yet, but it's a thread. And when you pull at a thread, everything begins to unravel. Another day passes, then another. Hope fades into dread, the city holding its breath. And then, on the third day, the silence shatters. A jogger, out for his usual morning run, the sound of his footsteps rhythmic against the damp earth. A trail he's taken 100 times before. But today is different. Today something stops him in his tracks. A shape, barely visible through the trees. Something that doesn't belong. A girl, face down in the dirt, her clothes torn, her body motionless. Jasmine Carter, no longer missing. Found, but far too late. The call goes out. Sirens scream through the streets. Officers swarm the scene, their radios crackling with urgency. And as the crime scene tape goes up, a new question takes its place. Not just, where is Jasmine? Not just, what happened to her? But something far worse. Who did this? The answer is closer than anyone thinks. Detective Andre Collins arrived moments later, stepping carefully over the uneven ground. He took in the scene, the way her body lay, her limbs awkward, unnatural, her clothing disheveled, her hands bruised, scrapes along her arms, as if she had fought. A deep red mark wrapped around her throat, darkening with each passing hour. His jaw tightened. He had seen this before. He knew what it meant. Strangulation. Someone had taken their hands, wrapped them around her neck, and squeezed until the light faded from her eyes. The coroner arrived, confirming what Collins already suspected. Blunt force trauma, a struggle, a desperate fight for life. And then, the final act, the one that stole her last breath. News spread fast. The congregation of Greater Hope Baptist Church gathered in hushed whispers, hands covering their mouths, eyes filled with shock. How could this happen? Who would do such a thing? The city grieved. Posters that once read missing were replaced with something heavier, something final. In loving memory of Jasmine Carter. A vigil was planned. Candles were lit. Tears were shed. But amid the sorrow, questions loomed. Who did this? At first, suspicion turned outward. A stranger, maybe? A predator lurking in the shadows? Or perhaps a jealous boyfriend? An ex, someone from her school? Investigators dug into Jasmine's life, searching for anything, an argument, a secret, a clue. Friends were questioned, teachers, neighbors, and then Erica Williams, the last person to expect her that night, the last friend to speak to her before she vanished. She sat across from Collins, her hands gripping the edge of her seat. She answered every question, her voice tight, eyes red-rimmed. She was supposed to meet me. She never showed. She never answered my texts. I called her, over and over, and then she was just gone. Her hands trembled. Collins studied her carefully. She wasn't lying. They looked at Jasmine's phone records, the messages, the calls, and then something strange, an entry in her call log that didn't fit. A number dialed that evening, a brief call, no messages, no explanation. Pastor Malcolm Carter. Collins exhaled. His fingers tapped against the table. Jasmine had called her father, right before she disappeared, and that wasn't all. He had an alibi, of course. He was at home, distraught, praying for his daughter's safe return. But something about it gnawed at Collins. The way he spoke at the vigil, his words measured, rehearsed. The way his hands stayed so still, fingers laced together, not the fidgeting of a grieving father, but the control of a man used to hiding things. Then there was the car, the grainy footage, the dark sedan pulling into the abandoned parking lot that night. The same one parked in the church lot every Sunday. The same one parked in his driveway the morning after she went missing. The same one that now sat in the station's impound lot, waiting to be searched. A warrant was signed, officers moved in, dusting for prints, searching the trunk, the floor mats, the seats, and then they found it. A single strand of hair, long, dark, caught in the fibers of the upholstery. And beneath it, something else. A faint smear of red, almost invisible to the eye, but under the lab's light, it was unmistakable. Blood. Jasmine's blood. Collins didn't hesitate. The pieces were falling into place. Too many coincidences, too many lies, and now the evidence was speaking louder than words ever could. Pastor Malcolm Carter wasn't just a grieving father. He wasn't just a man of God. He was a man with something to hide, And soon, he wouldn't be able to hide it anymore. Secrets don't stay buried forever. And in the case of Jasmine Carter, the truth was clawing its way to the surface, piece by piece, text by text, call by call. It started as a whisper, an offhand comment from one friend to another. Then a glance at a phone screen, a message thread, words exchanged in confidence, never meant to be seen by anyone else. And yet, here they were, staring Detective Andre Collins in the face. The kind of messages that don't just suggest trouble, they scream it. It was Erica Williams's phone that held the first real crack in the pastor's carefully constructed image. Hundreds of messages exchanged between her and Jasmine over the last few months, some mundane, some lighthearted, but then the shift, the change, the ones that carried something darker. Jasmine's words were sharp, panicked, furious. "You lied to me. How could you? He's my father, Erica. My father." The messages came late at night, frantic, raw. Erica's responses were different, short, defensive, pleading. "It's not what you think. I didn't mean for it to happen. Please don't tell anyone." Jasmine had discovered something that shattered the foundation of her world. The man who stood before the congregation every Sunday, preaching righteousness, condemning sin, had been hiding one of his own. An affair, a betrayal. But not with a stranger. Not with some faceless woman outside of their lives. No, this was deeper, more personal, more horrifying. Her father had been sleeping with her best friend. The realization must have been suffocating. This wasn't just a moral failing. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deception woven into the very fabric of their home, their church, their faith. Jasmine had texted Erica again that night, the message short, filled with a weight that couldn't be ignored. "I'm telling him tomorrow. I'm done with this." A promise, a decision, and then silence. Jasmine never sent another message after that. She never got the chance. The pieces of the puzzle were clicking into place. Detective Collins scrolled through the phone records, his eyes narrowing. A single call placed from Pastor Malcolm Carter's number to Jasmine's phone, just 30 minutes before she was last seen. The timing wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. Collins exhaled, fingers tightening around his pen. He knew what this meant. Jasmine had confronted her father that night, and then she had vanished. But there was something else, something they hadn't yet uncovered. The pastor's secret wasn't just about infidelity. It was about control, about power. And when Jasmine threatened to expose him, he had a choice to make. One that no father should ever have to consider. One that no decent man ever would. The investigators worked fast, pulling together every scrap of evidence. They checked security footage again, looking for anything they had missed. And then, there it was. The pastor's car, seen near the abandoned church parking lot at the exact time Jasmine's phone last pinged. He had lied. He hadn't been at home that night, praying for his daughter's safety. He had been out. And now, the question was why. They brought Erica in for questioning again. This time the tone was different. The room was colder, the silence heavier. Collins leaned forward, watching her carefully. He slid the phone across the table, open to the messages Jasmine had sent before she vanished. Erica swallowed hard, her fingers curling into fists in her lap. She didn't speak for a long time, but when she finally did, her voice cracked. "I didn't know." Collins waited. Let the silence stretch. Let the guilt eat away at her. And then she caved. She told them about the affair, about how it started, how Malcolm Carter had been charming, persuasive, insistent, how she had been too young to understand what was really happening. She had believed him when he said it was love, when he told her no one else would understand, when he made her promise to keep it a secret. But Jasmine had found out, and Jasmine wasn't going to stay silent. Collins's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about a man cheating on his wife. This was manipulation, grooming, a predator hiding behind the pulpit, using faith as his shield. And when Jasmine had threatened to expose him, she had sealed her fate. They had enough: the phone records, the car footage, the texts, the blood in the trunk, the bruises on Jasmine's neck, proof of a struggle. The only thing missing was the confession. But Malcolm Carter wasn't going to give them that willingly. No, they would have to take it from him. And when the time came, they would. The walls were closing in. What had once been whispered suspicions, stray questions, and uncomfortable glances were now hard facts, cold, undeniable evidence. And at the center of it all, Malcolm Carter, pastor, father, a man who had spent years preaching redemption, but now found himself in desperate need of it. It started with the alibi. When detectives first sat across from him in the interrogation room, Carter was composed, calm even. He had done this before, not sitting in a police station, but standing at the pulpit, answering questions, offering guidance. He was used to being the man with the answers. But this time, his answers were different. "I was at home that night," he said, his voice steady, "preparing for Sunday's sermon." A simple response, a calculated one, but something about it felt off. Detective Collins watched him closely, taking in the slow blink, the measured breath, the way his fingers tapped against the table. An unconscious rhythm, a nervous tell. They let him talk, let him explain, let him weave his version of the night like a carefully constructed sermon. But then, the first crack. "Pastor Carter," Collins said, sliding a photograph across the table. "Can you explain why your car was seen here?" It was a grainy still from security footage, time-stamped. A single frame showing Carter's dark sedan parked near the abandoned church lot. The place where Jasmine's phone had last pinged. The place where everything had ended. A hesitation. Just for a second. Barely noticeable. But Collins caught it. "That's not my car." A denial. Too quick. Too firm. "It is," Collins countered, his tone unchanged. "The plates match." Silence. The unraveling had begun. And then came the evidence they couldn't ignore. The kind that didn't care for excuses or carefully constructed stories. The lab results. The forensic team's report. The undeniable truth. Jasmine's DNA. Found inside the trunk of Carter's car. Not just a trace. Not just a fragment. A presence. Proof that at some point Jasmine Carter had been inside that trunk. Helpless, trapped, silent. And if there was any doubt left, it wouldn't last much longer. Because then there was Erica. The girl who had been caught between loyalty and guilt, between love and betrayal, between the truth and the unbearable weight of it. She had kept quiet for days, weeks, trying to convince herself that maybe there was another explanation. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she hadn't been complicit in something far darker than she had ever imagined. But the guilt was suffocating. So when they brought her back in, she broke. She told them everything. How Carter had begged her to keep quiet. How he had called her the night Jasmine disappeared, his voice thick with something she had never heard before. Fear. How he had told her to pray for strength and to trust in God's plan. And most chillingly, how he had whispered just before hanging up. No one else needs to know. It wasn't just an affair anymore. It wasn't just a scandal waiting to be exposed. This was something far worse. And Malcolm Carter knew it. He had known it the moment Jasmine had confronted him, the moment she had stood in front of him, anger burning in her eyes, and told him that she was going to tell the truth. And so he had silenced her. The investigation was no longer just tightening around him, it was suffocating him. The evidence, the lies, the phone records, the security footage, the DNA, the confession from Erica. There was nowhere left to hide. And now the only question left was, would Malcolm Carter finally tell the truth? March 2024. The day Malcolm Carter was arrested, the city of Atlanta stood still. The breaking news flashed across every television screen, every phone, every radio. A pastor, a man who had led Sunday sermons, baptized children, married couples, and prayed over the sick, was now in handcuffs, escorted from his home by detectives. The man of God, the spiritual leader, now just another suspect in an orange jumpsuit. The arrest wasn't sudden, not to those paying attention. It was the slow, crushing weight of mounting evidence, each piece more damning than the last. His alibi crumbling. His car captured on security footage near the scene. Jasmine's DNA found inside his trunk. Erica's confession, the final betrayal. The pieces formed a picture too vivid to ignore. And when the officers arrived at his doorstep with a warrant, he didn't resist. He didn't protest. He simply lowered his head, his hands cuffed behind his back, and let them take him. But while the evidence spoke for itself, the city wasn't ready to accept the truth. The congregation at Greater Hope Baptist Church was divided. Some stood by their pastor, convinced that this was nothing more than a tragic misunderstanding, a smear campaign against a good man. They gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs, praying, singing hymns. Others, however, felt betrayed, disgusted that the man they had trusted with their faith, their families, their prayers, had been capable of such horror. And then, the trial began. The prosecution wasted no time in laying out their case. They didn't need theatrics. The evidence spoke louder than any performance ever could. They played the security footage, zooming in on the car parked near the church lot at the time of Jasmine's disappearance. They presented the DNA results, Jasmine's blood found in the very trunk of the man who had sworn to protect her. They read aloud the text messages, the desperate final words Jasmine had sent to a friend just hours before she vanished. "I'm scared. He's acting weird. If anything happens to me..." The courtroom was silent. And then, they turned to motive. The why. The reason behind the unthinkable. Pastor Carter wasn't just trying to cover up an affair. He wasn't just trying to protect his reputation. No, he was desperate. Jasmine had discovered his secret, and she was ready to expose him. And in his mind, that wasn't an option. So he silenced her. The defense struggled. They painted Carter as a devoted father, a victim of circumstance, a man whose mistakes had been exaggerated and twisted beyond recognition. They pointed to his decades of service, his work in the community, the countless people who still believed in his innocence. But faith alone wouldn't be enough to save him. The prosecution's final blow came in the form of a witness, someone who had once stood beside Pastor Carter, someone who had trusted him implicitly, Erica. She took the stand hesitantly, her hands shaking as she gripped the edge of the witness box. She couldn't meet his eyes, but her voice, though unsteady, did not waver. She told them about the affair, about the whispered promises, the manipulation, the guilt. And then she told them about the phone call, the night Jasmine disappeared, the way Carter had sounded, not panicked, not confused, but firm, final, the way he had told her, "No one else needs to know." It was the final nail in the coffin. The jury deliberated for 2 days, 48 hours of weighing every piece of evidence, every word spoken in that courtroom, every plea, every prayer. And when they returned, their verdict was clear. Guilty. First-degree murder. A life sentence. Pastor Malcolm Carter, once a man revered by his community, would now spend the rest of his life behind bars. No sermons, no congregation, no pulpit, just silence. But outside the courtroom, the echoes of his sins still lingered. A church divided, a city shaken, a young life stolen far too soon, and a question that would haunt them all forever. How had they not seen the monster hiding in plain sight? In the end, the gavel came down, and Pastor Malcolm Carter was sentenced to life in prison. No parole, no second chances. The same man who had once stood behind a pulpit, delivering sermons on redemption and righteousness, now stood before a judge, condemned for a crime that shook his congregation to its core. The courtroom was silent, save for the quiet sobs of those who had once believed in him. Some mourned the man they thought they knew. Others mourned the young woman whose life had been stolen by the one person who should have protected her the most. Erica Williams sat in the gallery, her face unreadable. She had cooperated fully with investigators, answered every question, turned over every text message. And while the affair she had engaged in was immoral, it was not illegal. There was no evidence that she had played a role in Jasmine's murder. No charges were filed against her, but the court of public opinion was far less forgiving. Her life would never be the same. The stares, the whispers, the quiet judgment that followed her wherever she went. Some saw her as a victim, manipulated by a man in power, lured into a secret she never truly understood. Others saw her as complicit, an enabler who had looked the other way until it was too late. No matter what she told herself, no matter how much she tried to move on, one truth would always remain. If Jasmine had never discovered the affair, she might still be alive today. Greater Hope Baptist Church, the institution Pastor Carter had built with his own hands, did not survive the scandal. The doors remained open for a short time, but the congregation dwindled. Families left, unwilling to sit in the pews where they had once listened to a murderer preach about salvation. Donations dried up. The whispers grew louder. And then, one Sunday morning, the doors were locked for good. The sign out front was taken down. The building left abandoned. Just another relic of a faith that had been shattered. But this wasn't just the story of a fallen pastor or a broken church. This was the story of power, of secrecy, of a man who believed he could control the narrative, that his title, his influence, his reputation would protect him from the consequences of his own sins. How many people had looked up to him, trusted him, never questioning what lay beneath the surface? How many had dismissed the red flags, convinced that a man of God could never be capable of such evil? And how many other secrets, just like his, were still buried in the dark corners of other churches, hidden behind pulpits waiting to be uncovered? The wind blows softly through Jasmine Carter's memorial, a simple arrangement of flowers and photographs placed by those who refuse to forget. Her name etched in stone, a painful reminder of the life that was stolen, of the truth she tried to reveal. And as the world moves on, as new headlines take over, as other scandals and tragedies fill the news, one question remains. Did justice truly prevail? Or was this tragedy inevitable, just another consequence of secrets too dark to stay hidden? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.